You mentioned the name Tenley Albright, and it seems that all great sports stars have a rival. You had one. She was it. You chased her for years and years and years before you finally broke through. What was the relationship between you two? Oftentimes, in that context, it can be a little strained. What was yours like?
I don't think it was strained at all. We weren't very close. She trained in Boston, and I trained here in New York City. She was 5 years older than I was. And when you're 13, 14 years old on the world team, somebody who's 18, 19, they're really not interested in a 13-year-old. So we really didn't socialize at the competitions very much with each other. I respected what she did because she was world champion, 53 and 55. That didn't mean that I wasn't competitive enough that I wanted to beat her, but it was all a civil relationship. And since then, we keep in touch. There's a comradeship that we all have. You know, Christy Yamaguchi, Tara Lipinski now, all the Olympic champions from the United States. We're pretty much, I would say, sisters.
Speaking of this sorority, if you will, Sonia Henne pretty much, she was the first big star in skating, the three-time Olympian. Did you know anything about Sonia Henne? Did you know anything about her career? Did you follow it? Was she an idol of yours?
Well, she was an idol of mine. She'd come into Madison Square Garden and skate in the ice shows and have all this jewelry, you know, and gorgeous white costumes with all this fur and boa things around her neck, you know, very glamorous. And I'd watch the shows when I was 5, 6, 7 years old, and I think, oh, I'd like to look like that. I'd like to skate like that. I was disappointed, I have to say, the first time I met her. It was just, she looked at me and she said, oh, so you're Carol Heiss. She said, you're the young lady that they say is the second Sonia Henne. And she threw open this full-length white mink coat and she said, honey, I want to tell you right now, nobody's ever going to be like me.
The true brash.
Like, you know, no, I'm not, don't worry, I won't be like you.
What a Hollywood starlet, huh?
Oh,
and she was. I mean, she was it in her day.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, she had all the leading men in her movies, and she did very well. She was known as much for being a movie star as she was a figure skater.
After you won gold in 1960, there was one of the biggest tragedies we've seen in sport. In 1961, a plane crash which killed all 18 members, players and coaches of the national squad. That must have been extremely devastating, not only for the families and friends involved there, but for the world of figure skating.
Well, we lost 8 years, really, of skating because all my friends and teammates were in that plane crash. You know, the girls that had been second and third in the United States to me. And it was interesting because after the Olympics in Squaw Valley, everybody wanted me to stay in. And it was like night and day. The moment the Olympics and the World Championships in Vancouver that year were over with, I finished, and I just felt that that was the end of my amateur figure skating career. I just didn't want to compete anymore. I loved all the years of training and all the years of competing, but I just didn't want...
The Senior PGA Tour on CNBC. The stakes are higher. The field is stronger.
How fate deals you some interesting things.
Carol, you're a local New York girl. You came from a humble background, so it wasn't easy, but what got you interested first in skating?
I always loved it, and I still do. I have such a passion for this sport. A lot of different reasons, but it's just been something that I've always loved. My parents exposed us to a lot of different things. I mean, we played a little tennis on the public courts, we did swimming, we did a little skiing, and of course skating. And the first time we went, I know my mom said, I kept asking, couldn't we go the next day and the next day? And so she'd take me back in the afternoons and finally decided, all right, you know, the ice wasn't there anymore and it started to get warm and I still wanted to skate. So we joined the Brooklyn Figure Skating Club. And somebody there told my mother, well, you know, your daughter seems to be talented for this sport, and you ought to get in touch with Mr. and Mrs. Burnett and take lessons from them. And they were at the Skating Club of New York, and then we became members of that. and people helped us to get into it. It was a private club.
And for those who don't know, I mean, this was just a huge opportunity for you. This was a couple that were the two-time Olympic champions in pair skating, so to have them more or less in your backyard and to fulfill a dream of skating with these two was just phenomenal.
Oh, I was so lucky that they were right here in New York City, and I didn't have to, you know, leave my family or my mother come with me, and we go to another state to train. And I just adored Pierre. He was like a second father to me. He was the only coach I ever had. He understood my passion for the sport, and so did my mother.
Didn't he tell your mom that give me 10 years and Carol can probably be one of the elite skaters in the world?
Yes, he said 10 years. And when I was 10 years old, reporters would come over and, you know, just when they'd be there, when Sonia Henney would come around and say, well, now, what is your dream? And I'd say, I'm going to be Olympic champion someday. And my mother used to say, honey, you can't say that. Just say, you would like, you would hope to be, you know, and say, but Mom,
already tutoring you in the media.
Yeah.
But you were already telling the world what you were about to accomplish.
I'm going to be, you know.
So now your goals were your first Olympics in 1956 in Cortina, but shortly before those, you got the bad news that your mom had been diagnosed with cancer.
Now, I didn't know when I went to the Olympics. Those were the days when you know, you didn't mention cancer.
Stiff upper lip, keep it away
tell
from
anyone.
the kids.
Yeah, you know, nobody's supposed to know. And while we were at Cortina, she only came to one practice session. And I soon realized this was so unusual because I liked to have her come. And she was so supportive. My mother didn't know the jumps very well, even though she'd be at the rink. And she was not a skating mother at all. The only stipulations that I had from my mother was, look, it's expensive. We really can't afford it. You have to love it, and you have to work at it. So I loved having her there because she'd watch me do the jumps or a program, and she'd say, you look wonderful. You look lovely, you know. And so that's all I needed to hear.
You still had a good Olympics. You finished silver again behind Tenley Albright, but it was a very, very close competition. You were very close to winning gold then.
Yes, closer than I ever thought that I would be. I mean, I was hoping to be on the podium. So I was delighted with the silver medal. But then we went to the World Championships 2.5 weeks later in Garmisch, Germany. And my mother became worse as we went to Germany. And my father wanted her to come home, and she wouldn't fly home. She wanted to come with us. And at that point, I realized then that Mother was very, very serious. And I asked him, I said, you know, is she going to die? And just looking in his eyes and his face, he didn't have to say anything. I knew then that she was not going to live very long. For the first time ever in my career, I was first in school figures by, I mean, a tenth of a point.
But that was like a huge victory for you. You were in the driver's seat.
It was wonderful.
In your eyes.
I can remember maybe 3 or 4 performances in the 16 years that I competed that were absolutely wonderful. And that was one of them. I just felt great out on that ice.
Especially to know that your mom had finally seen you finish first.
Yes. Mr. Bernay came in and Pierre just said to me, he said, you've won. You're the world champion. And I looked over at my mother, gave her a great big hug, and she said, congratulations. She said, that's wonderful. She said, now let's go back to the hotel. I'm tired. And I knew then that from there on in it would be tough for our family.
And as you did gear up for the 1960 Olympics, your mom did tell you something else about 1916 Squaw Valley, didn't she, before she passed away?
Yes, on her deathbed, she worried about 2 things. One, what was going to happen to her 3 children without her. And I said, you've been a wonderful mother to us. All the things you've taught us, we're going to remember. And number 2, I said, I'm going to win the Olympic gold medal in your honor. I said, if that ever happens, I'll certainly try. But I said, I would like to do that in honor of you. So when I stood up there in Squaw Valley on that top podium, and you look at this medal, and it's the gold medal, gold Olympic medal, And that's when I looked at it and thought, Mom, I know you're here. I've done it. I've done it for you.
We're looking at a rally down here.
Over 1960 Olympic Games, and Carol, a lot of people didn't know that you were actually engaged, even though you didn't actually have the rock on at the time. But as the 1960 Winter Games were going on, you were engaged to Heiss Allen Jenkins.
Heiss and I started dating when I was 16, and we kept saying, well, if we feel this way in 4 years, if we feel this way in 2 years, you know, we'll get married. And when he proposed to me, I said, yes. And then I said, well, you know, what happens now? And he said, well, we won't tell anyone, because we didn't want it to come out on the sports page. And we didn't want it to interrupt with any of the skating at all. So when we went to the Olympics, a couple of the reporters had rumors about it. And they'd asked my brother-in-law. And David was so great, because he has a wonderful sense of humor, turn around and say, Carol Heiss is a sister-in-law? He said, wife, yes. Sister-in-law, no. So they couldn't report anything, even rumors or gossip, because they couldn't figure out who it was, Heiss or David.
And David was the younger brother of Heiss Allen Jenkins, who happened to also win gold
in
at the 1960
and of course,
Winter Games.
That's right. He was my era of skating. Heiss had retired in '56.
After winning the gold in Cortina.
Yes.
So when the wedding finally occurred, I mean, this was like, I mean, the footage of this wedding is absolutely unbelievable. Describe to us what kind of scene this was on the streets of Manhattan.
Well, it was all, everything was sort of fell into place. Heiss and I decided we were going to be married May 1st. And Pierre Brunet said, you can't be married on a Sunday. You have to be married on a Saturday.
Boy, Pierre Brunet runs your life, doesn't
he? He was very strict.
This guy doesn't stop at anything. He plans your wedding.
Absolutely.
He makes you do the figures and plans your wedding.
You know, he wanted me to be in a professional career. I think he had feelings about being a second Sonia Henning. And he knew that 20th Century Fox had some offers out there for me to sign a contract and make a movie like Sonia Henning had done. She had been with 20th Century Fox. So everything just fell into, as I say, fell into place. In 6 weeks, we had this wonderful wedding. Good friends were going to give us the reception. The rehearsal dinner was going to be given by other good friends. So it all was absolutely perfect. But when I walked out of the St. Thomas Episcopal Church that day, I looked out and there were all these people. And I knew I hadn't invited that many people to
Not the city of New York.
No. And I
looked like it.
And it was wonderful. Just wonderful.
Now, you mentioned Pierre trying to maybe make you the next Sonia Henning, give you the Hollywood treatment. In fact, you did make a film in Hollywood, did you? And it was Snow White, and it wasn't the Seven Dwarfs. It was
Snow White and the Three Stooges.
Now, what was that all about?
It really was pretty true to Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, except it was with the Three Stooges.
Where am I? How did I get here?
You're in the cottage of the Seven Dwarfs. But we don't know how you got here. We've only just arrived.
Oh, I remember now. The Queen. She tried to have me killed. Please help me. I'm in terrible danger.
Well, of course we'll help you, miss. But first, please tell us who you are.
Snow White.
I enjoyed the Three Stooges tremendously. I loved making the movie. Oh, they were wonderful. And they're very professional about what they do. They were saying the time in the golden age of movies, it was changing. And I thought, you know, I'm going to have to start a whole nother career. And this is going to be another 10, 12 years of training. And I wasn't willing to be away from Heiss. I wanted to have a relatively normal life, whatever normal is. I don't really know what that is. But get back to some sense of normalcy.
And in 1978, you were lured into the coaching world. Did you find that when you started teaching, that all of the lessons and all the philosophies that you've been taught by Pierre Brunet came flooding back to you?
Oh.
And that's the kind of teacher that you wanted to be.
Absolutely. All the things, and you know, it's like children who turn out to, oh my gosh, I sound like my mother, or I sound like my father. I would stand there and go, oh, Pierre, all those years I'd say, oh, why do you want me to do this? And I would be saying the same thing.
You had a certain criteria that when you worked with athletes, I guess, on a higher level, that they had to have, didn't you? I mean, you insisted that they stay in school. You insisted on some certain things, didn't you?
Well, Pierre always wanted me to be in school, all of his pupils, and it was the era when you did go to college. You stayed in school. We weren't homeschooled. And I was able to do both, and I thought, we really need to do that. And it takes the pressure off skating. If you're only skating somehow when you don't win, then the pressure's on because you've given everything up for it.
So what are your thoughts on the very young skaters that get into it at such a high, intense, serious level today, like a Tara Lipinski, who at 14 years old won the Worlds? Do you encourage the young skaters to go for it that much at such a young age?
Oh, sure, because remember, I was 13 when I made the world team. Now you can't be that age because, in a way, it is the Tara Lipinski rule. And I don't think it's right. I just feel if you have that maturity and you're that unusual at an early age, why not? But I also feel the other way. I mean, if you're 29, 30 and you can still skate well, why not? If you're the very best, age shouldn't have anything to do with it.
How long do you see yourself coaching?
Somebody asked me this last year, and I said, 10 years or so. And I went back to the room, and I started to think about it, and I thought, oh, my, I'll be 70, so I'm giving away my age. And I thought, I don't know. And I went back to this person, and I said, you know, I'm going to give you a different answer. I said, I really don't know. I don't know. I love it. I'm very passionate about this sport. I think I'll go as long as I can.
CNBC.com, the best way to track your investments.
Who you are and what you've accomplished?
Their parents usually tell them. And the moment they know that I'm Olympic gold medal winner, it changes their attitude.
Well, it's been a pleasure getting to know you. Thanks for dropping by the Olympic Show studios, and hope to see you in 2002 out in Salt Lake.
Oh, I hope so. Thank you very much.
Carol, thanks for being with us.
So much.
Carol Heiss, the gold medalist back in 1960. And oh, yeah, the silver medalist in 56. Thanks for watching. I'm Dan Hicks. We'll see you next week.